Well, hello everyone, and welcome to the latest episode of the Nordic Football Podcast with myself, Steve Wiss, and of course, Jonathan Faduba. How are you doing, JF?
Hi, Steve. Hi, everyone. I'm doing well, and great to be on the show with you this week. We've got a bit of a different show this week. We're going to sort of delve into, we are sort of nearly hitting the halfway point of the season, maybe a third of the way through, just over a third. So we decided we're going to do something a little bit different on this episode, Steve. But before we get into that, how are you, my friend?
Yeah, not too bad. As I was saying off air, I've got a little bit of a niggling injury right now from one of my various different sports, no doubt, this time of year. But it's always a great healing tonic to do an episode with you. So, yeah, bring it on. And like you said, we're just going to do a couple of different things on this episode, in addition to, going through some, key things.
Various sports. I could have sworn you told me you injured yourself in bed, getting out of bed.
Well, there's plenty of vigorous activities that can be done in the bedroom as well. Not that but
no comment.
But yeah, probably it was related to some sporting activity, no doubt. My hiking in the Yorkshire Dales, in the hills, or just playing old cricket, really.
Yeah, no, fair enough. I think the less we discuss your bedroom activity, the better, I think, for everyone. But we are gonna have a bit of a different show this week. You've startled me there, mate. I've lost track of what I'm talking about.
Hey, you were calling me unpredictable before this show, so now I'm going to throw all sorts of things at you. So get ready.
The plan for this week is a bit of a different show. We aren't going to do the traditional discussing the latest news in each league. We're going to go for something a little bit different. We're going to recap the seasons, and we're going to tell the story of the season through 5 or 6 different personalities that have defined the Eliteserien and Allsvenskan seasons to date. So something a little bit different. It's a bit of a shorter show this week. We, it's midweek as well. So, throwing you a bit of a curveball here. But we thought, let's keep things fresh on the Nordic Football Podcast. Let's spice things up a bit. And so what we're going to do, Steve, I think we're going to start in Sweden. But basically, we've picked 6 personalities. Can either be manager, player, can be anyone. That we feel kind of tell the story of the campaign so far. So from, for example, if you were thinking about the Premier League, if you were doing like a 6 people and personalities that define the Premier League, pretty sure most people would have Erling Haaland in there as one of them, if that makes sense. Someone who's defined the season, everybody's talked about, and that is what we're going to do. We're going to do the equivalent of that in Sweden and Norway. So, Steve, I think, is that a good way of summing it up? Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, it's like who's going to be the Haaland and who's going to be the Patrick Bamford, right? Of each respective league. So, yeah, I think it's an interesting way sort of to tell some of the stories of the season through different personalities, individuals, or whatever it might be. And we are going to start in Allsvenskan, where you say 6 people. I'm just looking through your list now. Nothing too controversial in here.
Don't reveal them. Just we'll go through.
Well, I'm not going to reveal straight away. No, I'll let you decide which order you want to do them in, Jonathan, my friend. Who are we going to start with?
Yeah. So first player on my list that kind of defines the season so far, and as we're about to head into a break as well in Sweden, Allsvenskan is about to pause for about nearly a month with the international break and everything like that, the midsummer break. So I think it's only right in probably what's going to be his last game. Well, it is going to be his last game in Sweden for a very long time, probably. Hugo Larsson is my first choice as one of the defining personalities of the season so far in Sweden. Obviously, Steve, my reasons for selecting him as we hit the 11-game mark, Malmo are top of the league. 9 wins, 1 draw, 1 defeat from 11 games. And I think that I did consider sort of having Henrik Rydström would have been an easy option, but I sort of feel like I've talked about him quite a lot. In fairness, I've talked about Hugo Larsson quite a lot as well. But since Rydström's still going to be sticking around for a few more months, I think it's only right that I doff my cap to Mr. Larsson, who is heading off, Steve, after this last game in Allsvenskan. As we mentioned on the show last week, or the last show we had, he has sealed a 11.5 million euro move, roughly, to Eintracht Frankfurt in the German Bundesliga. He's going to be joining a massive club. As we said before, only 18 years old, the midfielder. He's been a fantastic player to watch. He's played 60 games for Malmo already in 2 seasons since breaking through. He's become a central focal point in that midfield, an excellent player, and it's going to be sad to see him go, to be honest. I watched the Malmo Degerfors game on Monday, and obviously he scored in that, and he ran into the crowd, and at the end of the game he was there in the crowd with the fans, with this sort of what they call the sort of big microphones, singing with the fans and everything like that, and really childlike, to be honest. He's just a kid. He was enjoying himself, and I just thought, it's a really nice storyline, and I think one that kind of sums up the season so far. The return of Malmo, the rebirth, one of their academy graduates coming through, and has broken, of course, as we mentioned, the Allsvenskan transfer record. So he stuck around. He could have gone to Bournemouth at the beginning of the season. He stuck around for another sort of 4 or 5 months, but now he is leaving, and well deserved. And of course, like I say, I think he kind of embodies this Malmo team that is already doing so well as top of the league.
Yeah, and it was kind of fitting that he scored in his last match for the club at home. They recently smashed Degerfors. Yet another battering for Degerfors. Jonathan, I could see you spitting feathers when I was watching this game. It could have been genuinely 10 again, but that's besides the point. Hugo Larsson, do you think sort of the not the rebirth of Malmo, but the resurgence of them, it's not a coincidence that this is someone who has come through the club at youth level and really is massively passionate about the club? Sometimes it takes a character like that, doesn't it, to sort of bring things together?
Yeah, and I think his integration into the team has been a bit of smart business by Henrik Rydström. Of course, I mean, to be fair, he was already playing last season. He was a regular as well. So, but I think obviously Rydström has come in and looked at the squad, and I think he suits what Rydström wants to do in terms of a possession-based team. He wants to have the ball. Rydström as a manager, we've talked about that many times. I saw something on Twitter the other day saying he's one of the most interesting managers in Europe. I think the Twitterati, Steve, are starting to notice Henrik Rydström, which is always worrying for Malmo fans, probably, because once people start doing those little threads of his game model and stuff like that, it's not going to be too long before he's on the radar of other clubs, because Sweden doesn't get a huge amount of attention maybe in the wider sort of football ecosystem, but I've started to see a few threads of his game style and stuff like that, and as I say, when that happens, it means that he's getting a bit more recognition. Obviously, on this podcast, we've been talking about him for a good 3 years, Steve. But like I say, more people are starting to notice, I think. But Larsson, yeah, he obviously, Malmo's ball possession, Steve, is the best in the league by miles. According to our partners, Wisecout, 63.5% possession so far average, which is the best in the league by a good solid 8%. Ridiculous ball possession dominance. And Larsson, for me, kind of just sums that up. He is a very good passer of the ball. He's very intricate in the way he passes and moves. He can link play. He's actually second in the league, Steve, for completed passes. 946 according to Wisecout. That's only Sergio Pena of Malmo again has higher with 987. So as you can imagine, he's a pass machine, Larsson. Very good on the ball. Very comfortable in possession. He can progress the play. He's not an especially progressive passer, but he is someone who can do a bit of everything to his game, in my opinion. And he's just a player that I feel is, he's averaging 84.38 passes per 90 minutes, which is ridiculous, to be honest, really, and a decent sort of accuracy as well. So 92.28% accuracy, which is 9th in the league according to Wisecout data. So, yeah, I just think he's a really good player. And I think he's the sort of player, he reminds me a little bit of De Bruyne in some ways. I think he can actually improve his game and go on. I think he could probably start adding more goals. He took his goal really well against Degerfors. He can arrive in the box late. He can also sit deep and sort of like link players, a kind of Paul Scholes type, or, do the Scholes bit where he gets attacking. So I almost feel like he's a multifunctional kind of Swiss Army knife midfielder. And I think that going to the Bundesliga is going to improve his game. I think he can actually have more to his game. So yeah, I think we're going to miss him. I'm genuinely going to miss watching him because I think he's a really good talent. And I'm not even really sure I've enjoyed him enough. He's in my 10 to watch, obviously, on patreon.com/Nordic Football Podcast. So if you want to get that and have a look into him, but I almost feel like I haven't had a chance to enjoy him enough, really. So I will be looking forward to seeing him in the Bundesliga if he gets into the team and stuff. I think he will have a bit of adaptation period. It's a much higher level of the Bundesliga, but I still think he can get into the Bundesliga and do okay. I don't think it's a hugely high level Bundesliga these days. I think the level's dropped from sort of 5 to 10 years ago. So yeah, I could see him getting in the team, and he's a really, really good talent. Good luck to him in Germany.
Yeah, very well said there. I think there's going to be some Eintracht Frankfurt fans listening to this podcast with licking their lips based on what you've said there, Jonathan. But Hugo Larsson is one of your players or personalities to define the season so far in Allsvenskan. Moving on now to your second personality, who's it going to be?
Yeah, and I think I'll probably just run down the table, isn't it? I think that might make more sense.
Yes.
So I thought about it, and I'm actually going to mix up a little bit here. I've got a list written down, but I'm going to mix up the list slightly. We look at the table, and you can see obviously top three. You've got Malmo top, Elfsborg second, and Häcken third. And I think Elfsborg have probably been one of the stories of the season so far. A team that maybe we haven't spoken about as much in previous years, I think in the earlier years of this pod, Steve, but they've really, last 2 to 3 years, they've really started up their game. And so I think that as they are second, I'm going to name as the personality for them, Jimmy Tellin. He is going to be my second personality of the Allsvenskan 2023 season so far. Now, obviously, he's the manager of Elfsborg, and I feel like it's about time I gave him my flowers. So that is where he comes in onto my list of personalities. Now, I think I said to you, Steve, if he wins against Djurgården the weekend just gone, we should name the title after him because they would have been top of the league, obviously going into the summer break. They didn't quite manage to get the win. Won't talk too much about that game. Obviously, there was a massive controversy in it, which I think we tweeted, but the VAR sort of controversy. But yeah, Tellin, 45-year-old Swedish coach. He's someone that I've spoken about in the past, and I've been sort of hot and cold on him. I'll be totally honest. Like I thought in the early years, like he came through and he was like a really, really well considered coach. I think the first year we did this podcast, Steve, he was at Jönköping, and I think they got relegated. And I remember sort of at that point he was a really highly thought of coach. He'd been there for sort of 2-3 years. He came through their sort of like youth system. He was there, managed their 17s, managed their 21s, managed their 19s, then got the official manager's job. Did a decent stint there, sort of 100 plus games. And then he got the Elfsborg job in 2018. And he's been there ever since, which is, for one, longevity wise, he's been there more than 5 years now. So he's had a really long time. He's nearly approaching 200 games as a manager of Elfsborg. And because he was so highly rated as a manager, I think maybe expected a little bit more from him. And I think it took a while to get his game model into Elfsborg in terms of what he wanted to do. They had finishes kind of mid-table, lower mid-table. They didn't really impress too much. But I feel, Steve, he's really started to get a grip on the club now. And I feel he's really made the team his own. Their recruitment has sort of been up and down. They're a team that have had a lot of good players over the years that they've identified and sort of signed and then sold on. So they've got that Hammarby little edge to them in terms of selling players. You'll remember Joseph Akumu being one, for example, Steve, and there's been many others. But at the same time, they've also regenerated the squad quite well. And I think if you look at, for example, I think the key to their season so far, really, if you look at that defence, you've got Niklas Hult, is former, Nice player, he's been around the block. You've got Johan Larsson, you've got Lagerbielke, who had a loan last season, and then you've got the name escapes me now, but you've got, what I'm trying to say is you've got a really solid back line there. And that's kind of what they're built on, really. They're built on a solid defensive team that can Holman, sorry, yeah, that's it. Sebastian Holman as well, who's done it. He's 31 years old, had a really good stint abroad. So they've really taken the league by storm. Like I said, they were top. They beat Malmo 3-0 just a couple of weeks ago, which was a massive result. They've shown resilience in games. And I think Tellin is really started to implement his game onto that club now. And I think they're getting the benefits from it. I think they're genuine, maybe not title contenders, but I can definitely see them maybe going for a top 3 finish this season. So I think Tellin deserves a lot of credit, and he's one of the key names of the season so far, I think, in Allsvenskan.
Do you know what's interesting? I think since we've started doing these podcasts now in our 7th season, I think generally we're a pretty good judge of manager, I would say, as a duo. And I'm trying to think of another manager that you've got majorly wrong. And I think Telling's about the only example really I can think of. So you're right. You've got to give him a lot of credit because I think he did silence quite a few critics at one point, for sure. But if you were going to describe Jimmy Telling's philosophy and style and tactics in a nutshell, how would you describe it as?
Yeah, well, I mean, I would argue, I'm not sure if I got it wrong, because I think the league, if you look at their league finishes in the days where I was sort of saying that, I think what I said about him was, is he worthy of the hype that he's kind of getting as a sort of young coach? And I think if you look at the early league finishes when he first joined, I mean, there was one season they finished 8th. I can't remember where they finished in 2018. Steve, you might be able to tell me. But they had quite a poor few years. Then they finished 2nd, obviously, in 2020. But to be honest, it was more based around that feeling that he was one of Allsvenskan's best young managers. And I just felt that they didn't really match that hype in the early years. But you're right, that's it. 2018 season, Steve, they finished 12th. And I think that was around the time when I was...
I'm pretty sure you said in the following year's preview, the literally the only 2 minutes of airtime that Elfsborg had back then on the show the whole year, you were saying, I think the jury's out on him. It's a massive season for him. I think you maybe had him as the favourite in the sack race because, if he continued those sort of results, he would be struggling. But I think he bounced back after that, didn't he, to be fair to him?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, they finished 4 points above relegation in that 2019 season, which was his in that 2018 season. Sorry. So I think I wasn't too off on that, especially when it was his first full season and they've nearly got relegated. But like you said, the second season in 2019 they did slightly better, and they've sort of gone from there and just kind of gradually improved. And that's the point I was just making, that I think the time he's been given, and obviously this isn't the Premier League, Steve. I think if that was like the Premier League, he'd have gone in the first season. He would have been sacked. Yes. Because at the end of the day, you don't get the time. But this is a bit more of a relaxed league. He's been given that time. Obviously, 2019 8th place finish, not bad. Not amazing, but not bad. Don't forget, Elfsborg are quite a big club in Allsvenskan. They don't have huge expectations, but they're not a small club either. So there is an element of expectation. It's the 2020 season where he really started to kind of impress, but that was obviously the COVID season when they finished 9 points behind Malmo and finished 2nd in the table, which was decent. But that was a year where there was a lot of underachievement. Teams like AIK were really poor that season and others. But like I say, it's just gradual year by year progress that you've got to admire. Then you look at the 2021 season, Steve, where they finished 4th. And this is while sort of, like I said, losing players, but they seem to be very settled now in their recruitment, their structure. When you say what kind of manager is he tends to favour sort of a 4-3-3. He tends to like sort of press-resistant midfielders who are dynamic, who can get forward as well. I think he's someone who likes a pressing style. He likes fullbacks who can get forward. Johan Larsson's a fantastic example of that. He's sort of like a fantasy must-have, isn't he, these days? I learned that the hard way. And if you look at Hult as well, he's someone who's quite dynamic, very experienced. I think he likes reliable characters. Tellin, he tends to sort of bring players home from Sweden a lot, or former players. For example, Holman, Hult, like I say, Larsson. They've all been in Sweden in the past or played for the club. Then you've got sort of like dynamic players like Ondrejka, who's had a really good year. Jeppe Ockels, Ben Hardson. There's others that they've sold in the past as well. Then they do have that sort of blend of African players that they recruit, like Baidu, like Boateng, like Akumu in the past who's gone, and others. So their recruitment's been quite good over the years as well. They recruited from USL, for example, in America, all sorts of places they've found players and sold them on for good money. Väisänen obviously went to MLS for a huge fee. So it just seems like he's got a real grip on that club now. He really knows what he's doing. He knows what style of play he wants. I understand that they kind of actually have a really intricate way of analysing how they're playing, apparently. And I think there's behind the scenes of the club, I think they're quite smart. I think they look at various metrics for player recruitment and manager recruitment, and in terms of sort of game model, how much are they pressing, for example, how press intensive are these players that they're recruiting. So I feel like they are a team who they're quite smart in everything they do, and this is probably the year where they're really starting to get their rewards for it now. 2022 last season, Steve, they finished 6th. It wasn't as good as maybe, you thought maybe they would have gone on. But I think they seem to have 1 year on, 1 year off, if you know what I mean. And this is the year now people are genuinely starting to say, could they challenge for the title? So I think Jimmy Tillin deserves huge credit. And like I say, they are genuine contenders, I think, for a top 3 place.
Yeah, very well said indeed. So that's Jimmy Tillin. Moving on to your next personality, you are going towards the city of Gothenburg for this one. So take it away.
Yeah, so I suppose we've got 3 here who are good. Well, some of them are good, some of them are bad. So obviously I'm telling the story of the season here. So they're not all going to be positive. And I'm sure, I know you, Steve, but not all your names are necessarily going to be positive. But I'll stick with a positive one that tells the story of the season. And I thought about someone, who can I pick from Häcken? I thought about the manager, Per-Mattias Hogma, but I feel like he's got a lot of praise. I've praised him a lot in the show and praised him a lot in when I went to Gothenburg, praised him a lot when they won the league, of course. So I'm going to go for someone a little bit different. I'm going for Benny Traoré now. Why have I gone for Benny Traoré? Some people might be wondering. Well, I think the easy answer is that he's made a lot of people, Steve, forget about a certain name, Alexander Yeremiev. And I think that's the number one reason why I picked him, maybe not other players that I could have picked in that team. He's the top goal scorer in the league with 11 goals. He seems to score almost every week at the moment. That's 11 in 11 games. So, of course, that just shows you how well he's doing. And I think the number one reason I picked him, Steve, is I think that if you had asked me at the start of the season who would fill those goals, those boots of Yeremiev, who did so well, I wouldn't have thought that Benny Traoré would be that kind of player, really. I've always considered him more of a wide player than a forward, and he's taken that central striker role really, really well. He's intricate. He can link play. He can score goals, and I think that he's been a key part of Häcken's team. Obviously, don't forget as well, he missed a year with an injury, so really he's been playing catch up here, and he's almost seamlessly recovered. And I think that takes a lot of character. That takes a lot of personality. And also just a lot of strength in terms of mental and physical strength to just not dip your level when you have a major injury like that. So he's managed to get back to the level and even improve, I think, than the player that he was. He's probably better than he was before the injury. So I think he deserves massive praise. Häcken are they're in that sweet spot in the league at the moment where, they could challenge, but they're third at the moment, 3 points off it with a game more played. Still got Europe to come. So what do we expect from them going forward? Obviously, they're top goal scorers in the league. But they do tend to concede sometimes, compared to sort of maybe Elfsborg and Malmo. So I think Benny deserves a lot of praise. He's been a brilliant player. I love the song that the Häcken fans have for him. And I think he deserves to be one of the personalities of the season so far. I think he tells the story of Häcken's continuation.
There's a real physical aura of energy around him, I feel, with this player. He can't take your eyes off him, can you? There's a real excitement around the whole club, to be honest, full stop. There's a lot of the sort of team that you'd pay money to watch, no problem. They're my sort of team, the relentless sort of team. And he's almost a great sort of example of the personality of the team, isn't he?
Yeah, 100%. I think you've hit the nail on the head, really. They're fun to watch. They're relentless. He's a fun player. He's relentless. He's got a real bundle of energy about him, like you say. Big rumours that Ajax are watching him. So, we've got the summer break coming, Steve. I mean, how many of these players are even going to be there when we start in July again? Talking about these teams. So I hope it's not the last game we're seeing of Benny Traoré in the next couple of weeks. But yeah, there will be interest. I mentioned Ajax, and there's other teams watching him, of course, at the Bravado Arena. Scouts all over the place. When I was in Gothenburg, Steve, there was scouts from Germany, scouts from Netherlands. Like there's a lot of people watching Gothenburg football at the moment, and I'm sure he's one of the main reasons why. So yeah, he really embodies that Häcken team, I feel, and I think the biggest compliment, like I've said, no one's really missing Yeremiev, which is a massive thing. Let's not forget his goals were fundamental to their title success. I think let's see how the season goes, Steve, because I will say that I do think at times they lack a bit of a focal point, Häcken. I think Traoré can be shut down at times. I think Jurgen did a good job on him until they ended up getting beaten 4-1. And that just sums up how good Häcken are. But I do wonder about him as a sort of, he's not a target man like Yeremiev. They play a very different style. And I wonder, can they do a different style? I think in Europe that might catch up to them, because I think that teams might be able to contain him. But so far so good, because he's not the biggest. He's quite diminutive from that point of view. So I think the Ola Kamara signing hasn't really worked out so far. He's not really made much of an impact at all. So that is a testament to how well Traore is doing. So yeah, massive praise to him. He definitely tells the story of Hacken season.
It's all really nice and positive stuff at the moment, Jonathan, I must say. Maybe about time to switch the boot onto the other foot now, with perhaps something a little bit more on the pessimistic side, or someone who hasn't perhaps lived up to expectations or has been disappointing. So who are you going to talk about next?
Yeah, I'll just start it off with the following words. If you've got something to say it to my face. And that is going to sum up this next person on my list. It's not going to be a necessarily positive one, unfortunately. The next personality I think that sums up this season is AIK's Jimmy Durmaz. Now he's 34, 35, Steve, and unfortunately for him, despite the fact that he's a very experienced player with a great track record, great CV, great playing history behind him, experienced international, played for Malmo, he's played for Toulouse, he's won the league in Greece, he's won the league with Olympiacos. Big player, Steve, but unfortunately, I think he is emblematic of the problems at Oikor. Now, when we say problems, Steve, I mean, let's just look at the table going into the summer break. They are second bottom in the league. They've won 1 game in 11, which is ridiculously poor. Steve, they are 10 points behind Norrköping in 7th. They are 12 points behind Bromma Poikina, unbelievably, in AIK, in Stockholm. I mean, AIK consider Bromma Poikina like they're sort of like their strawberry garden, Steve. You know, they go in and pick any strawberries they want. They basically buy all their best academy players. To be 12 points behind them is like, I mean, that says a
shambles,
lot.
Isn't it, really?
That says a lot. And I think the fact that they're in relegation says enough. But the reason I picked Durmaz and maybe not Brandstrom, for example, I don't want to get too much on Brandstrom's back. I think he's got a tough job. And I think any manager would find it tough there, to be honest. But maybe one with a little bit less experience of big level clubs is finding it a bit difficult. And I think that's part of the reason that Durmaz is there, Steve. Just dealing with those big characters like Durmaz is proving tough for him. I could have named Victor Fischer. I could name other players, Steve. I'm not criticizing Durmaz in terms of his on-pitch output, because there's loads of players in there I could criticize. The signing of Abubakar Keita hasn't really worked out yet. Elias Durmaz, Victor Fischer. You could name almost every single player they've signed, in fact, and sort of point a finger, to be honest. Maybe Heliti's done okay. But even Omar Faraj up front, I think it's more Nigel than Omar at the moment. It's not really worked out for him. Even Guidetti, in and out of the team with injury, their recruitment, I think they're really struggling. They're lacking any player really at the peak, and it is genuinely almost time to start wondering, could they get relegated actually? Because even the players that are doing quite well, like Magashi, has just picked up an injury, who I quite like. I think it's probably been arguably one of their better signings. Victor Fischer can't stay fit, and Durmaz. The reason I picked Durmaz, even Bilal Hussein, such a top talent. He was in my 10 to watch last season. Not really hit the ground running this year, but Durmaz just sums it up. That big bust up they had between the manager and Durmaz in the training ground. And that's why I say the famous words: "If you've got something to say it to my face." That was apparently uttered in the halls of AIK between manager and player. Reports that Durmaz trying to get the manager sacked, and it's all going off. I mean, he has been put into the team now by Brandstrom, but it hasn't really changed their fortunes, AIK. So Durmaz is in there, Steve, a little bit of a negative one, but in terms of summing up the season, AIK are in real trouble. And I think Durmaz is kind of sums it all up, really.
Yeah, it's been
another negative one if you want. Can do back-to-back negative.
It's been disappointing for AIK. I actually watched their last game, by the way. I thought they were perhaps unlucky to not beat Kalmar, but it's just the way things are going. When you actually play well, you're still not winning games. So, Jimmy Durmaz. I tell you what, it's a real theme of Jimmy here, isn't it?
2 Jimmys
so far. Yeah, I'm trying to think of a Jimmy I can put into my 6 here, but right, let's move on. Well, yeah, might as well stay on the negatives, I suppose. I And this is a disappointment, isn't it? I'm going to be feeling a bit depressed after this one, I think.
Yeah, we'll do one negative and then we'll end it with a positive. So I'll run through them both, Steve. My second negative was, unfortunate. I mean, it's not negative, but it's just unfortunate. What I think one of the personalities of the season, one of the stories of the season, of course, it has to be your boys, EF Göteborg, and it wouldn't be right for me not to mention them because they are actually, as we speak, Steve, also in the relegation playoffs. I mean, how on earth they're 4 points behind Degerfors, I will never know. I could have picked Degerfors joint managers, to be honest, as personalities, but we've already got one episode title named after them. So let's not have two because I could rant about that. I could rant about their away performances for another week. Disgraceful. But the player I've picked as the personality, I think, unfortunately for him, is Marcus Berg at EF Göteborg. Now, one win again, just like just like Oiko, they've only won one game. In fact, they've got an identical record, Steve. Both of them played 11. Both of them won one game, drawn 4 and lost 6. The only difference is that EF scored slightly more. AIK only 8 goals, incredibly. But both of them have 7 points. It's just that EF have a better goal difference. So they are in the relegation playoffs as we speak. And, we're nearly, they're going to be in the relegation playoffs going into the summer break at best. I mean, they could be in the bottom 2, but they're not going to catch Degerfors by the end of this weekend. I know they've got a game in hand, but the fact is they're going to be in the bottom 3 going into the summer, which is disgraceful, really. And of course, Steve, we do have to sort of just briefly mention Jens Bertolascu, former pod guest. He's just been announced as the new manager this week. When we interviewed him, Steve, of course, remember lockdown, he was in the Faroe Islands. He's now worked his way from Faroes to Denmark to Sweden, and he is the new manager of EF, which we will discuss maybe in another show. But the reason I picked Berg is just I feel like he is coming to the end of his time. He's been a legend, don't get me wrong, in Swedish football. A solid international player. He's got tons of caps for Sweden. Been a really big name. Did well last season. I thought he was on his day. He was probably one of the best strikers in the league last year. But even towards the end of last season, he was talking about his body and just how he was even talking about, can he do another year? And I think he's given it a go, but I think his body is catching up to him, Steve, unfortunately. It happens to all of us. You're struggling to get out of bed without pulling a calf. Age does catch up to all of us at one point or another. And I think that, sadly for Marcus Berg, I think it is catching up to him. And I think that is a bit of an emblematic sort of story of EF season, really. I think age is catching up to them. I think just kind of they aren't going in the right direction, let's say, in terms of where they are at the moment. I'm sure they'll turn it around. There's some great people there, smart people, and I'm not criticizing that, but just at this moment in time, being in the bottom 3, they've obviously taken drastic action now with appointing a new manager. Berg is turning 37 in August, Steve, and I mean, he's still got a few goals this season. He's still got 3 goals. He's a legend, like I say, but it's just, unfortunately, they're not really creating much up front, and I think he's one of the reasons, really. I just think he's not quite dynamic enough, unless they play teams that maybe sit a bit deeper and allow him that space. I just think he's struggling more and more. In fairness to him, his XG at times is pretty good. I mean, he can still get shots on target. He's still getting assists. I do feel like in some ways I'm being a little bit harsh on him. Obviously scored a penalty against Hammarby late on. He's still clutch.
I don't think you are. I've got to be honest. He, as good as he is technically still, and he's a good positional player. I've watched quite a bit of him. He's so slow. That really strikes me. I don't know whether it's because of what they're asking him to do and everything, but he just, you're right, he's lost a lot of dynamism, unfortunately. I mean, the Titanic probably turns quicker than Marcus Berg, doesn't it, now? I can't talk. I'd have an acceleration of one on Football Manager, but yeah, he's not just lost half a yard of pace, has he? He's lost 5 or 10 yards of pace. It's a shame. I feel like a poacher role would suit him pretty good in a better team, if you know what I mean, a more dominant team.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I mean, I'm not going to comment on his pace because he's probably still give us a run for our money. But I mean, I agree with the fact that he'd be good in a better team. Weirdly enough, he'd actually probably happen to be one of the best scorers in the league, if you know what I mean, in a way. If he just had wide players who do all the running for him and put it on the plate, he'd be fine, but he doesn't. And I think that's the problem. They don't have anyone around him who can even sort of do the running for him. And that is the real problem with their attack. They don't have that pace in any of the forward positions, really. Gustav Norlin, okay, he's not bad, but he's not really that quick. I can't even remember. They got Markovic. They've got, Olsen obviously getting injured is a massive blow as well in terms of going forward. He was probably their best attacking player in the early part of the season. So they just, Carneal's been injured as well. He brings at least a bit of youth and energy. I really like Linus Karlstrand. I think he's someone who, in my opinion, I would give Linus Karlstrand more game time. I think he's a youngster who's really bright and enthusiastic. I liked him when I saw him in Gothenburg. Cheeky little grin. He looks like a bit of a character to me. I think he's going to have a bit of a career. But yeah, the reason I say he's emblematic is because the EFK in general lack pace. They lack dynamism.
They are a slow team.
When you compare them to Häcken, it's like night and day. They're just completely opposites in that sense. So that's why I'm going to sort of say him. And I think, Durmaz and Berg kind of sum up the situations of AIK and EFK. And I'm pretty sure EFK will look to go into the market in the summer and try and get a new striker. So that kind of sums it up, really. There's rumours about Victor Edvarsen maybe going there. I'll wrap it up because we're running out of time. I'll tell you my last two. I'll count them as one because they are joint managers. So my final personalities of the season so far that sum up this season, I think we have to give a massive shout out to the joint managers at Bromma Poikina, Andreas Engelmark and Olof Mellberg. Haven't really discussed them too much on this pod this season, but 5th in the league, Steve. Incredible achievement for a newly promoted side. I tip them to go down. I mean, I can almost say they're safe now, to be honest, even with 11 games gone. They're that far ahead, but you're not quite. Maybe they need a few more wins, but the way they're going to pick those wins up. No problem. Unbelievable achievement from them so far. Been really, really good. Really, really surprised me. I did not see this coming whatsoever. Maybe lack of preparation on my part, maybe underestimating them. But 6 wins out of 11. Like I say, they're really looking good. In the last few weeks, they have obviously gone to Norrköping and won 2-0, of course. Excuse me. They've had some easy games. Obviously, don't forget they lost their first 3 in a row, Steve. Lost at Djurgården, lost against Malmo, and lost 5-0 at Elfsborg. And everyone thought, wow, this is going to be a short stay. But they won the next 3 in a row. I guess the only thing you could say is they've had some sort of, not easy, but they've played obviously Varberg. They've played sort of Halmstad, Värnamo, teams around them that maybe they could get points off. But I still think getting wins at Kalmar away, Norrköping away is massive. So the joint managers there, I think they've done a really fantastic job. They went through a period, I think they had 4 clean sheets in a row as well, which is not, no mean feat at any level. So clearly they're well organised. Clearly, despite not having the best squad, they're getting the best out of those players at this moment in time. And although I think their run of games is going to get a little bit harder coming up, I think they can really hold their heads high. So that will be my final pick as sort of someone who kind of sums up the season, really, Bromma Poikina, this fresh team that's come in and been a breath of fresh air in Allsvenskan. So that will be it for me.
Yeah, I've just been looking at their metrics, actually. They're legitimately good. They deserved exactly where they should be right now. They rank mid-table for expected goals against. I'm actually just shocked to see there is a team that has a worse expected goals against average per game than Degerfors.
Who's that?
Halmstad.
Yeah, but they can actually defend, so that's fine.
Well, they're obviously being quite lucky, or the goalkeepers have an unbelievable season, but I was actually shocked to see Degerfors not bottom of that metric. But that's for another day. I'm still having nightmares. I'm having nightmares now of Marcus Berg listening to this episode and challenging me to a 100-meter race if I ever go over to Sweden and absolutely.
You might have to, mate. Especially as an EFK fan.
Beating me by pound.
I think
he goes off in the distance like Usain Bolt.
I think we'll definitely have to get that on YouTube. That would definitely be a must-watch video, I think. But yeah, I think hopefully that's for the listener. Hopefully that sums up the season so far. I think it's a unique, a sort of different way of recapping the season. 6 personalities, not criticizing any of them, but they just happen to sum up each respective team's sort of predicament. So that'll be it for part 1, I think. Hopefully you got value from that. Hopefully tweet us at Nordic Footpod if you like the concept. If you've got other personalities you feel we should have mentioned. Could have gone for 1 or 2 others maybe, but I think all in all, it's not too bad. So looking forward to yours, Steve, in Norway. We'll get a cup of tea and we'll be back to get into Meat Man Soccer's personalities in a minute. Welcome to part 2 of the Nordic Football Podcast, the latest episode. And don't forget, patreon.com/Nordic Football Podcast. Just want to say a huge thank you to all subscribers, everyone who's engaging in our content, weekly shows that we have. And we are going to be doing some analysis pieces. So keep an eye out for that. And I really mean it this time. We are going to have some juicy content coming for you. So if you're on that, then thanks a lot again for your support. As always, it helps us keep the show running and it really means a lot to us. And also, if you haven't subscribed to the YouTube yet, Nordic Football Podcast YouTube, get on it because we're nearly at 500 subscribers. And the shows are always go on YouTube every week. So let's get into what you've been waiting for now.
Yes.
Get your chairs, strap yourself into a chair, maybe get a cold drink just in case. I feel like this could potentially be a little bit explosive. A disclaimer: the views of Meatman Soccer do not represent the views of the Nordic Football Podcast in general, or Jonathan Faduba, and we will
now
not be
hold your horses here.
We will not be held liable for any legal action or defamation of characters.
This was going to be the most positive of sections, and I just tweaked things up a little bit, but let's see how things develop because I think there's a lot of good things to say about Eliteserien this season so far.
Let's do it. And first on your list then, Steve, in terms of summing up the season in Eliteserien in Norway, who is the first personality on your list that kind of encapsulates this year so far in Norway?
I think this one name does completely depict the whole season so far, really. And that's Bård Finne of Brann, who we've talked about an awful lot on this show already this year. So I don't want to go overboard with him, but it would have been obviously an embarrassment not to include him on this list because he's really, Brann have done brilliantly this year. They're second in the league. They won the Norwegian Cup. They're playing nice looking football. There's a real positive atmosphere around Bergen and everything like that. And Bård Finne, I think, is right at the centre of it. He's the heartbeat, the engine of the team. Scored a lot of goals, provided a lot of assists, and along with a certain other someone in the north of Norway, I think he's been streets ahead the best player in the league. Simple as that right now. And a lot of the great things that are going on at Brann are through him. It's as simple as that, Jonathan.
Bård Finne, 28 years old. We spoke about him in recent shows, and you mentioned Brann just having such a good year. And like you said, this year does feel like the story of Brann, doesn't it? Really, their revival. I think that's a massive storyline. So I'm not surprised you've got him as your kind of first pick. In terms of expected goals, obviously you've left out Aiko Adams. A bit of a spoiler here, but you've just left him out. He's got 7.95 XG. Bård Finne 6.49 XG, second in the league. But as you said, Finne is enjoying a really good season in terms of goals, and 9 goals. I think it speaks to just the beauty of football sometimes, isn't it? You can never write a player's career off. Sometimes you're doing well, sometimes you're not doing well, but you can always, it's never too late, is it? He's kind of, you mentioned, I think you said he was a bit of a nothing player at certain points of his career, really. Gone into Obos, become some sort of like Van Nistelrooy, and he's, some of the clips of the goals he's scoring this season have been phenomenal, really. It says a lot about confidence, doesn't it, Stephen? And how it's never really too late as a footballer to sort of turn your career around. Would you agree?
Yeah, well, I've called him the Steve Savidan of Norwegian football, haven't I? Former Valenciennes striker who really enters his prime around the age of 28, just like Bård Finne has. And I don't think he's a player I've ever completely written off before, but I think he had flattered to deceive. You always felt there was something more there, but he just couldn't deliver consistently, whether it was a mental thing, whether it was a club thing. But I'm just looking now at his total minutes in all competitions this year, competitive matches, that is, 1,009 minutes, and he's contributed with 12 goals and 5 assists. That's damn sensational, really, for someone who's playing effectively up front. But it's his passion as well. You can tell it means a lot to him being at Brann here, and you can feel like there's several other names at Brann who deserve a lot of credit. The manager himself, Erik Horneland, could perhaps deserve to be on this personality list. But Bård Finne, like I say, now you're talking about him as, one of the absolute key players in the entire league, a must-have in fantasy. I think only Pellegrino scored more fantasy points things like that. He's an indispensable player, and he's got him into the Norwegian squad. He's going to be potentially playing alongside Erling Braut Haaland in the next matches. I mean,
That's incredible.
It's incredible. It's incredible, isn't it? So fair play to him, and whether he can keep it up. Well, of course he can keep it up, because I think he's a clever player and he's a great technician. And I think if you have those two elements to your game, as long as you can stay fairly healthy, then I think you're always going to achieve something in football if your mind's in the right place.
Yeah, testament to never giving up. So congratulations, board finner. Like you said, maybe playing with Haaland, that's incredible, really, and just shows it's never too late if you keep your determination, as you mentioned there, Steve. So good one to recap the season so far. I think he definitely epitomizes this year's season. Second on your list, you did mention a certain someone. Take it away. Who you've got next on your list of players that define this season so far, or people?
Well, you don't have to be Mystic Meg to predict this particular name. I mean, it's one of those players that year on year you almost, I try to avoid putting him in, but Armel Pellegrino seems to go from strength to strength. He's like a fine wine, isn't he? He just gets better with age. I mean, I think he's 33 now, or knocking on the door of 33. And I mean, some of the goals that he scored this year are absolutely unbelievable. Like the goal against Odd, the first two goals against Stabæk, sensational stuff. I mean, technically, he's the best player in the league by far. And Buda Glimt are obviously at the moment they've won every single game bar one. They're heading towards another title, and Pellegrino is still the man at the center of things. You just feel when he's in the team, they're capable of anything. Like, they can always find a way to win if Pellegrino is on the field. And just the sheer pleasure and beauty of watching him play and some of the stuff he does on the ball is an absolute joy. I think everyone would enjoy him apart from perhaps Tromsø fans. And, Pellegrino statistically is a monster as well. Impossible to keep him out of this list of personalities that depict the season so far, because, he's been one of the star men.
If you had to name a key moment for him, a key goal, because he scored some stunners, I mean, some of their goals have gone viral on Twitter. They've been unbelievable. Is there any moment that kind of sums up his quality for you, that you really, number one in your list?
Yeah, it's the first goal against Stabæk this year, actually. It was in week number 2. I think he was injured in week 1, or he came off the bench. And, he's against a goalkeeper in Isak Pedersen, who, spoiler alert, I might mention him later. He's been brilliant this year. I mean, and the sheer audacity to think he can score such an unbelievable goal against that sort of goalkeeper is outrageous. And I also think in week number 2, people were thinking, Stabæk have done well. They just beat Molde in the cup, which could be a banana skin sort of game. They were 3-0 up by half time, I think it was. And so I think that goal set them going. You know what I mean? It's one of those where it just felt like a really key moment. And also he equalised late against Brann. That's the only game they've dropped points in this year, but it was in the 94th minute. If they'd lost that game, might be a different story now. Since then, they've won 6 on the spin. So those, I would say, are the 2 really key goals this season that have been difference makers for Buda Glimt.
Yeah, I mean, some of his goals have just been absolutely outrageous, to be honest. So he deserves huge amount of praise. I mean, Glimt have really, they're running it back, aren't they? They're sort of they've re-announced themselves this year and doing really well. He's 32 years old as well, so you've got to enjoy him while you can. He's going to be 33 in a couple of weeks, actually. So you've got to enjoy this sort of vintage fine wine player while you can, to be honest. So yeah, Armel Pellegrino, a good choice there, I would say, Steve, in terms of players that sum up this season. Let's move on to the next one. You've got somebody who's in the top 3. It's not necessarily a manager, though. It's not necessarily a player, though, is it?
No, and do you know, I think there's been a couple of accusations recently against me, not specifically direct, but that I favour Buda Glimt more than Tromsø, and I don't give Tromsø enough credit for what they're due or worth. So I think Galter Hellstrup, the manager of Tromsø, is got to be a personality or someone who deserves a mention on this, because they're third in the table. And I mean, each week I kind of dismiss them, don't I? On metrics, I'm saying they've been lucky. They're not remarkable to watch, things like that. But they're a result team. They're a really good result team, and I think, all things considered, you've got to give the manager unbelievable credit for finding ways to. I've watched him, and I think what the Tromsø do really well is they have moments in matches, like spells, like a 10 or 15 minute spell, 20-minute spell, where they change the game. Do you know what I mean? They play key moments really well, and also they're happy to soak up pressure for, say, 20, 25 minutes. And it might be a reason why it might be a real freak anomaly, Jonathan, that metrically speaking, like expected goals against, shots, things like that. It might be that's why they're not as good as you think, because they're happy to take these moments where they will soak up pressure, but realistically, they don't maybe look like conceding a goal, if you know what I mean. So in sport, there always are anomalies, and I think this manager's really, really clever manager. Like, tactically, he's getting the absolute most out of his squad. So I think Tromsø and the manager do deserve a lot of praise and credit for getting to being where they are in the table, especially with Bodø Glimt doing so well. Their arch rivals, obviously top of the league. I think there's a real hunger in Tromsø to try and just do as well as they can and stay on the coattails of Glimt. And it's interesting. They've drawn each other in the Norwegian Cup, the last 16. And that will be played, I think, on around the 24th of June. And if Hellstrup could do a tactical job on them in this cup, I think that would be a real feather in his cap.
Yeah, and it's nice to hear you praising them, because, sometimes, I mean, metrics can only tell half a story at times. And I think sometimes we can get too bogged down into it and maybe kind of miss the actual what's in front of our eyes, which is that they're having a really good season. And sometimes just you can enjoy it just for what it is. I guess what you're saying is maybe it might trend off, and you very well may be proven right. But I guess as of today, we have to give them a lot of credit, really, Steve. So fair play to you for that one. And it's nice to see two teams.
You are right. You are right that it's not all. I think sometimes we can get too bogged down with metrics, and I think after a certain amount of time, you've got to look at it and think, well, why is this happening? And it's not always to do with bad luck, good luck, things like that. It's a result game, isn't it, football? And I watch them play, and I never really feel like they're a bad team. I never really feel like they're an amazing team either. So, but I do know whenever I watch them, they're really, really well coached. You're looking at a 3-5-2 system, sometimes 3-4-3, and they're a really. I know there's a lot of Tromsø fans who listen to this show, and I think the manager is doing you really, really proud right now.
Yeah, sorry, Tromsø fans, if Meatman Soccer's been a bit downbeat on your excellent season, I think. But, at the end of the day, at the moment, you're having the last laugh. So definitely a really good season for you guys. And, continue to listen in, because every now and then we will give you praise that you are one of the stories of the season so far, according to Mr. Meatman. So the next one you've got on your list, Steve, is a bit more of a general point, isn't it? In terms of what recaps this season.
Yeah, this is not actually a person or anything. It's just basically listed as Eliteserien defenses. Now, this is both good and bad, really, because I'm not going to actually moan, because there's been a lot of goals scored recently. But an interesting statistic, in the last 32 matches played, the last 4 rounds, so 32 matches, 64, obviously, teams in action, there's just been 9 clean sheets out of 64 possibles, which is remarkably low, really, I must say. And don't get me wrong, there's been a lot of entertainment, and I'd much rather that than have 0-0s all around the park. But unfortunately, I don't know what it is. Just recently, certainly the last month, was the last sort of 6 weeks, some of the defending in the Eliteserien has been shambles, and there's been mistakes everywhere. There's been, I think, teams that tactically just think, oh, we can outscore you. We're not bothered about defending, leaving things exposed. And again, I'm not moaning. I'd much rather watch that sort of football. But I think it just has to be mentioned that this season has suddenly become really quite high scoring, really high scoring indeed. So with the exception of 2 or 3 teams, if you've been back in the overs, over 2.5 goals in games, certainly since the first couple of rounds, you've been laughing. So defenses at the moment, they've not been impressing me overall, Jonathan. I mean, some teams more than others have especially disappointed me. But
would you say that's because maybe is that worse than previous years, or is there a theory behind that? Is it just general, or are you saying it's markedly worse than maybe previous years? And do you have any theories as to why?
It might just be a spell of like a 4 to 6 week spell. And we find, to be fair, usually goals do start to flow more as the summer comes in into Norway. The pitches get better. I think the weather's been pretty good up there since, so that could be a reason. But I mean, when we did the 10 to watch this year, again, I'm not going to give away every name, but there weren't a lot in Norway defensive-minded players. And I feel maybe the quality of defence is just not there right now in the Eliteserien. So it might just be a sign of the times where, offense is ruling over defense. And it's always been traditionally a high-scoring league. But it's just, recently, I've just been shocked by some of the mistakes that are just glaringly obvious laziness at times. So, and I think the other thing, John, I think there's some teams that when they find themselves behind, they've just been giving up in games a little bit. You know what I mean? It's like, I don't care if they don't care about taking perhaps, a couple more goals on, which again, it's a refreshing attitude, rather than something like a big Sam Allardyce attitude of, oh, we're 2-0 down, we'll just keep it 2-0. We won't try even to score. So I don't even want to criticize in a way, but I just feel like it's something that maybe perhaps needs to be mentioned that defensively, there's a few issues across the league right now.
Yeah, fascinating stuff. I'd be interested to hear if any listeners have any thoughts on that as well. Maybe any theories. Is it just concentration? Do you agree with Steve? Do you have any other thoughts yourself on that? Maybe you're being kind, maybe not naming names in terms of teams and stuff, Steve, but I think that's fair enough. It seems like it's more of a general trend. So let's move on to a person before we end up, or do you want to, well, you choose actually, because one is a person, one is a person, one is a machine. So
we'll go with the person first.
Okay. So you're going to end the show with a machine?
Yeah.
Right. Who's your person?
The person is Isak Pettersson, the goalkeeper at Stabæk, and I have praised him quite a bit this season. But there's a few keepers I think have done actually quite well in Eliteserien. They've needed to with those defenders ahead of them have been performing of late. But I think Pettersson, I've said before, I don't really know how the hell Stabæk got him. I mean, he was once Allsvenskan goalkeeper of the season. He moves to Toulouse in Liga. I mean, I think we all presumed at some point he would end up being the number one starter there. He ended up warming every bench under the sun. Hardly ever got a minute. I still think he could be a starting keeper for a French Ligue side, no doubt about it. And then randomly, Stabæk pick him up. Now, again, I don't want to. There's nothing against Stabæk, but this keeper just feels far too good.
Permanent transfer, right?
I mean, I need to look at the ins and outs of this transfer, but I'm pretty sure it was a free transfer for, and I think I don't know how long the contract is. Free transfer from Toulouse, former Norrköping. It's absolutely incredible, and he has looked quality. Some of the saves that he makes, reflex saves, absolutely outrageous, really is. And you think he's going to get beaten, and he's not. He's added so much to this team, and but he's really bought into a club. Some players, they think they're better than, go somewhere, think they're better than, the club they're at or whatever, or the league standard. But you can tell he doesn't look like a sort of guy who gets like that, overconfident, cocky. he's really settled in nicely. And you know me, I do love a good goalkeeper. I do. Apart from when I'm on an overs bet or something and they're denying me. But I just love the way this guy operates. There's several keepers I'm enjoying in the Eliteserien right now. But Isak Pettersson, I think, is also summarizes goalkeepers as a whole in the league. It's been good. And secondly, Starbec's sort of resurgence back from their promotion. They've done really well so far this season. And I think Pettersson's been one of the reasons for it.
Yeah, I mean, it's always great when someone buys into the league. I personally don't know what he's doing there, because I remember our Allsvenskan team of the season. I'm pretty sure he was in that. When he was in Allsvenskan Norrköping, it was clearly that's why he got his move to Toulouse. He was unbelievable. He was definitely a very, very high quality, even for Allsvenskan. And I don't know if you'd agree if Allsvenskan's a better league. I'm not sure, but he's certainly someone who I think has been a phenomenal keeper. So sometimes these anomalies, these quirks happen, and fair play to them for picking him up, because I think he's a really good goalkeeper. I couldn't believe it when you told me he's back in Norway. So yeah, that is a very interesting one. I think he left in 2020. Am I right in saying, to Toulouse, was it?
He left Norrköping to Toulouse in January 2021 for $1 million. Oh no, sorry, no, it was a free transfer as well. His market value was $1 million back then. I think it should have been more. Then obviously a free transfer now to Stabæk, and the contract runs out at the end of 2023. So I don't think he's going to be lacking for potential clubs, is he? If he keeps performing like this. And then watch him sign an extension with Stabæk.
Yeah, absolutely phenomenal. I'm just I'm on it now, actually. I'm going to just read a little. I'm going to read my 2019, because I think actually Steve Weisgart have taken down half our blogs, because they moved to Huddle, didn't they? And I think a lot of our blogs have been lost in the internet atmosphere. Yeah. So I'm just going to read. This is 11th of December 2019. What I wrote about him in our combined Allsvenskan Eliteserien Team of the Season 2019. Voted goalkeeper of the season in the Allsvenskan 2019 award ceremony. It's been a fantastic year for Pettersson. The shot stopper has got a call up to the Swedish national team, and he's also been called in the Swedish national team training camp in January 2020 with a 79% save percentage, 3.92 shots faced per 90 minutes. He's regularly tested but stands tall on the majority of the occasions. He is arguably the best goalkeeper in Allsvenskan at 22, saving his team in key games with some magnificent saves. No keeper kept more clean sheets in the division this season, and his save percentage ranks third in the league, despite facing more shots than any other top-ranking team in the league, and nearly double that of the two keepers with the best save percentage. With 1 year left on his contract, there is sure to be big interest in Pettersson's services from clubs in the coming months. I mean, how on earth has he ended up back in Norway a couple of years later? That's definitely a statistical quirk, maybe. Or he needs to get a better agent. I'm not sure, but fantastic stuff. Yeah, I really rate him, and I think it's a great spot, Stephen. I couldn't agree more. He's a really good player. But your final pick, well, I'm almost sad that this is the final pick, but we've had enough of men and human beings on this show, so let's have a story of the season in the Eliteserien that is nothing to do with human beings whatsoever.
Yeah, I mean, you said machine, didn't you, there? And I was almost tempted to change it last minute to someone like Erling Braut Haaland. But
well, Pettersson's a save machine, I guess you could say.
But the last, personality. Is it a personality? Yeah. I mean, it's pretty obvious. Definitely, you know where I'm going to. Listeners will not be surprised that VAR has to be mentioned. Obviously, the first year that VAR is coming into Eliteserien, we're now 10 games old, and I think overall, I mean, look, we can debate things until we die whether it's needed. At the end of the day, VAR is in football now. It's here to stay. It's just how it's refined going forward, really. I think it's been a bit tedious, though, in Eliteserien. I'm not going to lie. And I think there's a couple of reasons why. I think it's taken away a lot of the charisma and personality of this league. You cannot get away with stuff now in terms of red cards. There's already been 14 red cards this season, Jonathan. Now, bear in mind, we've only played 10 rounds. In fact, most teams have actually only played 9 matches. last year there were 24 red cards overall, which was actually on the high side. In 2021, there were only 17 reds the whole season. We're just 3 red cards away from already matching the 2021 tally. And most of these red cards have been given via VAR, changed via VAR, as I predicted at the start of the season. It's just the way it goes now. So I think it's been a shame. I just feel like you should let each league have its own sort of personality. And there's always been a higher threshold in Norway for stuff like that. But it is what it is. But my main gripe with it, and it still does my head in around the world, is the time it's taking for decisions. Like for obvious things that you know the referee's going to be called across to have a look or should, but it takes like 5 minutes, or it feels like 5 minutes before he even goes across the monitor, and I just don't get it. There's been enough leagues now where VAR has been in operation that Norway should have been able to hopefully streamline it, but it seems even slower there than in other places. Maybe it's because it's the first year they're doing it up there. Maybe we'll let them off a little bit. But I just wish some of the really obvious decisions could get done a lot quicker, because it just slows the game down. You start, stop, and I think that suits certain teams more than others as well. I think that's definitely a thing to look at. So it's been a mixed bag of VAR so far in Norway. I think there has been some good things as well with it. There has been some decisions that they got right, but it wouldn't be an NFP episode without me having some sort of rant about it, would it?
Well, the fact of the matter is, this is the first season, like you said, and it's going to be a major storyline. It would be probably almost wrong of you not to mention it, to be fair, because it's, as you say, it's the first year. There's always going to be opinions, but I think you're right to mention it at the end of the day. And I think if we look at Allsvenskan as one of the last existing non-VAR European leagues, I mean, some of the decisions in Allsvenskan in the last few weeks have almost made me want VAR. That's how bad they've been. But I totally agree with you. I mean, listen, let's not end. I mean, you mentioned there that you could talk about this until we die, and we are all going to die one day. So I think we don't want to waste our time going over VAR again. But of course, it's been a definite theme of this season so far. So tweet us at NordicFootPod with your thoughts on Steve's choices. If there's anyone we missed, is there anyone that you agree with that should be in our sort of personalities so far? Listen, there's a long way to go. We're not even halfway through the seasons yet. We've got a lot more things to talk about, Steve, between now and the next few months. But I think this has been a pretty well-rounded show in terms of giving a flavour. If you hadn't watched any of the seasons so far, I think you've got a bit of a decent insight into what has been going on in these leagues. So well done to you, my friend.
Yeah, I enjoyed that. It was something a little bit different, and I think you've got to mix it up sometimes, haven't you, in the podcasting world? So I hope you all enjoyed certain things there. Probably, like 2 or 3 guys or mentions that we perhaps wouldn't be able to have that chance to talk about in detail in a normal episode. So appreciate you all listening, and hope you enjoyed it.
Yeah, thanks so much, everyone. Always, if you have ideas for episode formats, of course, because sometimes it's nice to hear listeners. Maybe you might have a suggestion, something you want to see. We've got our email address on the Twitter. You can always tweet us and give us your ideas. Normally we ask for listener questions as well, and you always have good questions, a lot of you listeners. So this week, something a little bit different, recapping the season so far through sort of 12 personalities there, or machines. So thanks a lot for listening. As I say, everyone supporting us on Patreon, thanks so much for that. And we'll be back soon. We've got a bit of a break coming up in Sweden. As I mentioned, there'll be no games after this weekend for about 3-4 weeks. But we'll still have some Norway things to talk about, and maybe some transfer content as well. So keep it peeled on the Nordic Football Podcast as always. But that'll be it from me, Jonathan Verduba. Thank you so much. You can get me on Twitter at JFFootball, JFFUTBOL. And Meatman, where can we find you?
You can find me at Meatman Soccer. Simple as that. And like I say, we've got this little bit of a break now in terms of domestic matches, but we'll be back again soon. Stay safe, take care, and see you around.